CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 481.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's the thing. When it comes down to it, this real estate game, this building cash flow game, this whole thing that you and I are playing, it can feel like it's lonely at times. It can feel like you're the only one who sees things a certain way. What are you talking about, Jay? Well, here's what I'm talking about. I am talking about the fact that you know, like I know, when you turn on the TV, everybody's flipping this and fixing that, and they've got ways to go into a property or do a deal really, really quickly and just be done with it. But what about the rest of us? What about those of us who believe that, you know what? If I'm going to take the time to develop an asset, I should keep it for a little while. I should profit for a little while. I should manage it over time. And unfortunately, in my opinion, there's just not enough of us. Well, today's guest is someone completely like that. So I'm pretty excited because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that you and I, we want to buy it, we want to rent it, and then we want to profit. In fact, that's the title of his book, and I am, of course, speaking of Bryan Chavis. Now, you may know him because he has spent 2 decades building his real estate ventures, and you need to understand something. When you build it, and you are a property manager, and you are a landlord, and you are someone who has trained over 50,000 landlords because of your Property Management Academy, it means you know a lot of stuff about a lot of people, and that also means that you and I have a very unique opportunity to learn today. So let's make sure that we are ready. Make sure your mind is open. Make sure that pen or notepad or iPad or whatever you like to use today is ready to take some notes because you and I are about to go to school and listen to Bryan Chavis. Bryan, how you doing?
I'm blessed. How are you?
I'm pretty excited because man, there's not enough of us in this game. That's all I'm going to say.
I know, right?
So,
I know.
Now, this being the first time that you're here, I got to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else. You ready?
Fire away.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, you know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them, as an entrepreneur, I can occasionally envision myself flying around town using our products and services to save our customers. And maybe I am wearing a cape and tight, but you know, it doesn't matter. Now, on the other side, just like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. You know, think about Spider-Man, for example. There was a time where he was just going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos, that was it, trying to earn some pizza money. Then one day he gets bit by a spider, realizes that he's got superhuman abilities, and he gets to use them for good or for evil. His choice. So my question to you is as follows. Before your book, Buy It, Rent It, Profit, before the Landlord Property Management Academy, before your coaching, before your training, before your speaking, before everything that everybody knows you for today, what we want to know is, who is Bryan Chavis?
Wow. That's the first time I've gotten that one. Who is Bryan Chavis? Well, it's easy because it's, you know, it's well documented and it's the truth. If it's on Google, it's the truth. You know, my first career, my first dream or goal was to play professional basketball. So, you know, I spent most of my career being an athlete, and you know, I got started late. Picked up the game in ninth grade and in junior high school, transitioned to high school, and then was a late bloomer. then caught on as my junior and senior year. Was able to pick up a scholarship, left school early because school wasn't for me, and then began to play overseas in what now is the NBA Development League, and kind of bounced around in a lot of various small little leagues. But essentially, that's how I got back to my parents' house. When the phone stopped ringing and opportunities stopped presenting themselves in athletics, I was home, and father was basically, you gotta get a job or you gotta do something, but you can't sit around here all day. And so I remember being in the backyard. It was a rough neighborhood where I'm from. Typical story. Rough neighborhood, limited knowledge, education, training. So you never really took school seriously. So now I'm sitting here, trying to figure out what am I going to do. And so I remember having a newspaper. This was back when newspapers were, relevant. Not to say they're not relevant today, but I don't want to offend anyone. But when they were a part of everyone's daily life, I was looking in the want ads and come across a leasing job. And the reason why I liked the leasing job, number one, I was accustomed to affordable housing. My father was in it. My aunt was a director of affordable housing in the city of Winter Haven, Florida. I had some exposure to the property management sector. Wasn't too familiar with it, of course. Like I said, my main focus was sports at that time. But I think the thing was, what was attractive to me was you can live where you worked, and my vehicle really didn't work all that well. So living and working in the same place was really awesome. Attractive. Yeah, it was attractive. So that's how I got started. Didn't have a resume, didn't know what a resume was. Reached out to a friend of mine named Archer, and he, told me come over to his father's house. I actually came, picked me up. We went to his dad's house. I basically created a resume, which means I lied from top to bottom, my experience and my expertise. Just started faxing my resume. Went to the unemployment office, and they had a little room you can use, a fax machine, phones. I went there, faxed my resume. Back then, you used to get those little books, the apartment guide books, with all the apartments and stuff like that, and their location, their address, so on and so forth. So I got one of those books and just started faxing all the apartment buildings my resume, and would get tons of calls back, and just started going on interviews, and that's kind of how I got started and worked my way on up to once I got a job, acquisition specialist, and and that's when I made the transition to become an entrepreneur after about a little over a decade of working for others in the multifamily industry. But it was I worked on a lot of projects back then. They were taking a lot of what we call Class C properties. A lot of individuals were trying to reposition them to Class B in certain areas, and then they would exit the strategy. So that gave me a lot of experience, ton of experience handling those acquisitions and working on the redevelopment side and repositioning the assets, because there's a lot that goes on when you reposition, go from a C property to a B. I'm sure you can understand that. You're not only the cosmetics of the buildings, but you're really you're focusing on the new demographic and the new psychographic of your prospect tenant. So there's a lot that has to change, from colors to the way you show the units, the way you speak, the touring, everything changes. So I learned a lot, and then of course I made the transition when I felt like I could do this for myself. I wanted to do this for myself, own my own apartment buildings. That's when I decided to make that transition.
So, all right, there's a number of things that you said just now that are pretty awesome. First of all, let me catch everybody up. A fax machine is what we had before email. Apartment guides it's a book before websites, and newspapers. Yes, they are they're on their way out, but some of you may have actually seen one of those too. So now, with all of that being said, here's the thing that I want to stress, and I would love for you to detail for some people. because I know this was true for me. There was nothing in my background. No, I had no pedigree that said I was going to go do real estate and own hundreds of units and cell phone towers and do what I do today. There was literally nothing. And you sound that very same way. My question to you is, for the individual that's out there that is feeling like, how can I get in? I don't know anything. What would you say to them?
How did I get in? Well, I mean, for me, I wouldn't recommend taking a job in the multifamily industry or working for your local apartment complex, though that's an option. But keep in mind, just as you just said, Jay, there wasn't X, Y, or Z. There wasn't, the internet. There wasn't, the access to knowledge, the way there's access to knowledge nowadays. So now, you can reach out and grab a mentor or a coach, to whereas, the only way me and you could probably, do that was to go to work for someone and learn and spend, over a decade going to school, let's just say going to school, spend over a decade going to school and learning this industry and then able to strike out on your own. But nowadays with, Udemy and a lot of these other platforms where you can gather education, training, YouTube, there's just so many different outlets now that you can gather and glean information from, to where, there's no excuse for those. So if that's holding you back, the not knowing or not understanding of a certain industry, I really don't know what to say. Then there's definitely something else, because saying that I don't want to do X, Y, or Z, it's challenging because I don't know the industry or the field. Really, that excuse can't be played. That card can't be played in today's social media environment or technology environment. It's really hard for me to sympathize with anyone that says, "Hey, I'm sitting on the sideline because I lack knowledge."
I agree with you. The bar is so low today. In my opinion, it almost feels like it's non-existent to me. How about you?
Exactly. Absolutely. I could not disagree with you at all on that. I mean, there is no bar. I mean, and the technology is just getting greater and greater every single day. I mean, now our refrigerators talk to us.
Right? You saw that one too?
Yeah. So, and understanding my background, dealing with what I've dealt with over the last 4 or 5 years, dealing with a brain tumor and having to learn how to walk and talk again, I really have zero tolerance for anyone around me or in my space, with any type of excuse, let alone, I don't have the knowledge or I don't have access to knowledge. No, that's just that, you have to try something else. If you're not succeeding in today's, market, or you're not competing, there's definitely something more to that story, because it's not a lack of knowledge. Now, sometimes one can argue that, hey, look, where you get your knowledge now, that's something else we could drill into. That could be a whole different other podcast, because nowadays everyone's a thought leader and everyone's an expert. So you have to be very conscientious and very cautious where you look to get your information, because, I see a lot of individuals getting along today calling themselves experts or thought leaders, or have this book, that book, this course, that course, so there's a lot of, now I guess the decision is who do you go with versus I can't find the knowledge. I think now it's where do you go? And I think when you were asking me what we wanted to talk about on today's show, you can quickly listen to someone and determine whether or not they have the experience or expertise, if you just listen. And you don't have to understand the industry to know. I could be sitting across the room from someone who's a rocket scientist or an engineer of some sort, and I could quickly determine whether or not that individual, number one, knows what he or she is talking about, or number two, would be willing to share with me or have the capacity to teach. Because just because you know it doesn't necessarily mean you have a capacity to convey that to others. As a leader, a mentor, or coach. So, then it becomes, understanding who you need to reach out to and who you need to hook your caboose up to when it comes to, who you want to learn from. And that probably is, for me, that is a valid excuse to stay on the sideline, because everybody's willing to take your money with some sort of program, coaching, online training, or something of that nature. And there's a lot of people getting along with, saying that they're a thought leader because it's so easy these days. So, that is probably much more of a realistic challenge, I think, to your listeners than I would say, the lack of knowledge that exists out there, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. 100%. Because there's a difference between knowledge, experience, wisdom, and then having the ability to teach those things. All four of those things have to line up, and that's not always easy to actually find. Now, before we go too much further, though, I want to hit on something because you hit on it, and it overlaps with exactly why real estate even called to me in the first place. And it was simply some of the medical challenges that you mentioned when we were getting started. My wife, she has a condition known as hyperemesis. I had a punctured lung. Well, her condition meant she could not eat or drink while pregnant. I could not walk and talk simultaneously without fainting. And we discovered we needed a way to earn income in case we were sick. And real estate became that way for us. What has your previous health challenges taught you about the benefits of real estate or real estate, the industry? How has it supported you in such a way that it has you, for lack of a better way of putting it, making this comeback? Because it's like, yes, this is the industry for me. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad that you are enjoying what you are hearing thus far. But here's one of the things that's really important. One of the most important things that you can do is get started. One of the things that I've said before, and I say again, once you get started, stay started. But more importantly, there can be lots of roadblocks to getting started. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of those roadblocks for you and make it a little bit easier. Because the thing that I don't want to stop you is thinking, do I need a local number? How about a long distance number? Or should it be 800? How on earth am I going to make that happen so that people can contact me as I'm out there building my business, making my cash flow grow? But most importantly, understanding that it doesn't have to be difficult. Many of you may know, but if you don't, there's a company out there by the name of Grasshopper. And what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Grasshopper is the entrepreneur's phone system. It works like a traditional phone system, but requires no hardware to purchase, no software to install. It's just a number that flat works. So if you are out there building that distributed workforce across many different locations, it's a way for you to still go out there and make your number be unified, simple, easy to use, something we've been using for quite some time. So again, go over to trygrasshopper.com/cashflow diary. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story.
That's a good question. It's funny because I was talking with a former NFL player right before I had to leave to come do the podcast here in our office. And he was saying the exact same thing. And I might go off a little bit, but to come back bring it back on track. But
sure.
He was a prominent athlete, played in the NFL, played with the Carolina Panthers, and he was explaining to me, we both have children and at a young age, and we were just talking about the transition from sports into, coming into the workforce. It's almost like a veteran coming back from war. All you know is war, and now you have to get a job, and it's like, he felt the pressure of he was telling me, I felt the pressure of doing something big because I've been on the pedestal all my life. And, so now I need to do something huge. I just don't know where to go. And he felt like, analysis by paralysis. What do I do with my life? And I was telling him, hey, man, I went through the same thing. And, and we were, I told him, listen, the reason why I like real estate, which brings me to your question, it's like real estate is, technology-wise, it's changing rapidly. I'm using new software and trying to learn this new platform right now as we speak on, so I can analyze more deals from my desktop in one place, where I can get all kind of various different analytical information, what I call CIOTA, a strategic evaluation of target areas, all this information in one spot. And I was telling them, at the end of the day, the technology is changing, but the way I evaluate from cap rates to discount rates, net present values, cash multiples, IRRs, that will never change. So yeah, the industry is changing with all the new technology platforms that are being introduced, but I can still feel like I've been sick and I've been gone, but I can come back. And you know what? Net operating income is net operating income. You know why? You know what I mean? How I calculate cap rates and cash multiples and discount rates, none of that has changed. So at the end of the day, I can still feel confident that, you know, that one can not feel like they're left behind like other industries. You know, if you worked for, I don't know, and I'm just throwing something out there, but Blockbuster, and, you know, you come back, oh yeah, you know,
yeah,
UHS World or whatever, you know, now it's Netflix, everybody's streaming stuff. Oh, you know, I used to work at a movie theater, and now, you know, it's, you know, just the industry is changing. You know, I used to, you know, whatever it is, you know, I used to work for a payphone company. Oh, I used to be a taxi driver, and now you got Uber, and you know, so things are changing. People are, you know, they're confused. This is a shared economy we live in now. So, you know, just everything is rapidly changing. But for me, real estate, it's not changing. It's getting easier with the platforms, but the way you analyze the deal and the due diligence process, and how I hone in on targeted areas, the fundamentals never, they haven't changed, nor will they ever change. So that's why I thought, for me personally, real estate is appealing, and you know, and real estate doesn't look at you and say, hey, you know, you this is something that's unattainable to you. One, look at who you are, you know, the color of your skin. You know, you're maybe a single parent, you're overweight, you don't have education, you don't have training. There is none of that with real estate. It's come as you are. Whoever's willing to learn, whoever's willing to educate themselves, whoever's willing to take the risk, you know, that's really the only barrier to entry. Is, you know, are you willing to, what degree of risk, you know? But as far as a degree and having to have any kind of education or training, in the conventional way, you know, there's really no, you know, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're black, white, doesn't care if you're coming from a impoverished neighborhood, doesn't care if you're coming from a entitled background. You know, no, you know, the playing field is level. And the opportunity is extremely high. The ceiling is there is no ceiling. So you know, for me, that's what I found attractive about real estate, with my background, especially my educational background, as well as I was never a good student, and the reason why is because I was special education. And you know, I found it difficult. Thank God for sports, but I found it difficult to keep up in school. It was frustrating, and you know, but, you know, real estate, you know, I excel in real estate. You know, I've gone on to now have a book in the U.S. Library of Congress. So clearly, you know, there's a talent there that was hidden, that wasn't identified in the public school system. And so, you know, clearly I had skill levels. I mean, you mentioned, you know, I've trained over 50,000 people. You know, and that was when we started, you know, keeping track of the numbers. The first couple of years, you know, that I trained, we didn't keep track of those numbers. So probably more than that, you know. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that barely graduated high school, with a special diploma. So, you know, really, real estate, it doesn't care. It's just how hard are you willing to work, and you know, and what degree of risk are you willing to take?
And you know, that's. We've done, and I've always had a special place in my heart for athletes. I was headed down that path myself, and then got hurt in high school, and that changed everything, which you know, has led to me being able to work with our USA men's national junior basketball team, you know, before they go make their money, trying to help them understand. We've had a number of ex-professional athletes on the show. In fact, if you want, feel free to let the guy you were talking to know about Mark Blount. I think you may know him. I don't know. But episode 376, he is another who has made that successful transition, specifically in his case from the NBA as well. And because these are things that are close to my heart, and yet it's what you said that makes the most of it. It's that it's one of those few industries that I believe where the rules are the game of the rules of the game, and if so long as you play, you're good. And one of the best things that you said was that, you know, your genius isn't always identified in a school system. It's just not. And I same way. Even though I was able to deal with school. It wasn't a place that I needed to be. And I didn't know that for a long time. But now that I figured that out, I'm like, oh, this is where I should have been all along. But no one was there to say, hey, you shouldn't be over here I'm trying to fit square peg into the round hole until the cows come home, because nobody said anything otherwise. So with that being the case, when it comes down to it, what I must now know, I mean, because I get this question anyway, so I'm gonna ask you. You go out there, you do your thing. You could keep doing your thing, i.e., keep the knowledge to yourself, etc. What motivates you to go out and speak and to teach and to share your information?
For me, that one's easy, because my father, where I come from, a background of givers. In my heart, it's just sowing seeds. It doesn't matter what if it was real estate or something else. I'm always willing to sow seeds, and I also feel that for the most part, for me, especially moving forward after being sick and this part two of my life, this rebirth. For me, it's about, it's not only, it's about sowing seeds into others. But, for me, it's almost like my ministry. I'm not going to get behind a pulpit. I'm not a preacher. I'm not, that's not me. Heck, I mean, I struggle to get to church on Sundays every day, so I'm your average guy. But for me to say thank you, Lord, for what you've done for me and how you've, the journey that you've seen me through to this point, and to give thanks for the ability to be speaking and walking and talking. I mean, look at God bless Senator John McCain. I mean, most people don't come back from brain tumors. There's not too many people I can look to. Most of the individuals are in the grave. So for me to be delivered and to be doing what I'm doing, I have, for me, we have an obligation. Everyone has an obligation, if you learn something, to be able to, to express whatever it is you learn and to teach others and to sow seeds into others. That's, for me, that's the true meaning behind all this, is to be able to tell others how to go about doing it. I've been fortunate enough to write these books and do what it is I'm doing. I think my platform is a lot smaller than, of course, I've fallen behind in so many years of being gone. And thank God for individuals and podcasts and interviews like this to be reintroduced. But, but for me, that's what it's all about, is being able to share. That's why it was so difficult for me to kind of really figure out what I wanted to say when you said, what do you want to position? What is it that I don't have I don't wake up. That's not my mindset. There's others who are great salesmen. I think of Grant Cardone, great salesman. There's others that probably wake up thinking sales. I don't wake up thinking sales, and there's nothing wrong with that if you do. I don't wake up thinking sales. If I can sow a seed into others, and sometimes to my own, maybe I do need to think more a little bit sales for, when it comes to your brand and building your brand. Sometimes you should be a little selfish. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but ideally, it's just not in my DNA. I feel like we all should. We all should share, especially when it comes to learning skill sets that others can benefit from. So, it's just, I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, Jay, but, it's just, it's just in my DNA, brother.
Yeah, no, that totally makes perfect sense. I struggle to answer I'm like, why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you asking me that?
Right,
Isn't this what I'm supposed to be doing?
But then you do see other people, and again, I'm not dropping any names, not saying anything what Grant Cardone or anybody else does is wrong, but then you do see individuals who seem a tad bit more polished, and that's what it's about. So I'm sure that's why people do ask that question, because they're like, well, so where's when they, at least Grant, it's coming. If you're not saying it, you're not being, people are like, well, they're waiting. Well, okay, I want to listen to this man on the podcast, but when is the pitch coming?
Right.
And then if you don't give the pitch, they're like, okay, then it's a secret pitch. It's, then they're more skeptical. So,
right.
That's why they do ask the questions, I'm sure.
No, totally understood. Right now, and you would have no way of knowing this. You're reminding me, there was I did an episode with Thomas Smith. He transitioned from football to real estate. That was episode 452. You and he you're reminding me of each other right now. So it's something that I find interesting. It's because this connection with real estate is such a people thing. It's such a it to some degree it does feel like it needs to be in you from the beginning. Now, with that being said, though, what would you say? What are those skill sets that maybe you learned it before you got to where you are, that someone listening right now who's looking to get into real estate or take their real estate to the next level, what are those skill sets that you would go, you know what? These are the things that are going to make you excellent at this industry.
Finance, without a doubt. Budgeting.
Yeah, there was no hesitation
finance.
there.
yeah, without a doubt. Budgeting and finance, because again, you're talking to a guy that never even passed math class through high school. Never had a passing grade in math, and now I write books on the subject matter. I'm talking about eternal rates of returns. I'm not only talking about it, but I'm articulating it in lectures and consulting gigs. And being able to calculate net present values, discount rates. To me, sometimes I have to sit back and go, wow, you've come a long way. But so yeah, the finance and the budgeting aspect of things and understanding the accounting, for me is really extremely important for those who are going to get into this game. And that's really any business, because you got to be able to you have to become really savvy on understanding how to evaluate the cash flows and how to operate and maintain your properties through budgeting, because these days with the cap rates as low as they are on certain projects, and really, to be honest with you, desirable projects, usually the higher cap rates, there's a lot more risk involved. To be able to go at some of these projects with a lower cap, you have to sharpen your pencil, and you have to be really skilled at the operating side of things to be able to achieve some of the cash on cash returns that we're getting from the properties. And then you have to couple that with the understanding how to create your tax strategy, and put all these things working together to be able to get a much greater return. So none of this would be possible without the ability to understanding the financing aspect of things, how to underwrite some of these projects, and then how to, as an operator, how to get in and set budgets. So for me, that whole realm of financing is extremely important, and then asset protection, being skilled at understanding how to create the right corporate entities to be able to house your projects under, and understanding how to some of the language of the wealthy, how to and I don't want to say manipulate the system, but because the system was designed for the wealthy, so we're really not manipulating anything that they haven't already created, and they created it for a purpose. But understanding the hidden ideas of like the new tax laws, the new changes, the opportunity zones that they've just acknowledged, and the different how S corps have gone from 35% to 21%, understanding what that means, understanding the various different entity laws in your state, LLCs versus S corps, C corps, how they work, what are the best ways to house your investments, what are the best ways to own and operate your portfolio, just having a strong understanding of those topics or sectors of real estate, to me are really important. Those are the areas that individuals should constantly hone their skills, because the tax laws change. Every 3 to 5 years or whatever, the tax laws change constantly. So, staying abreast of that information, understanding the new technology that's out there as an operator. So you're always constantly, I would say on the finance side and the operating property management side of things, you're always, honing your skills and learning new skills to be successful.
You know what's really interesting about everything you just said there?
No, what?
None of that is in kindergarten through 12th grade.
Oh no, hey, I didn't find it in college. I might have been a little more interested in real estate had I found someone talking like this. When I was in any form of school, college, high school, but you're absolutely right. But they don't teach that, and that's, But again, who's writing these? Who's making policy? It's the 9 to 5 guy, and I don't knock the 9 to 5. My parents were the 9 to 5 people, but that's who's making policy. They don't know any better. I can't have this conversation that I'm having with you with my father.
Oh,
he doesn't know.
Don't even go there.
I have this conversation with most of my family members because there's no knock against them, but it's the reality. But yet these are the individuals that are making policy, in our public school system. So, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And so, I have a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old. They're coming up and they're going to understand, what their father does. My wife is a very successful doctor, psychologist at Johns Hopkins here in St. Pete, Florida. We're two different sides of the coin. Highly educated, got me. So, but I'm going to teach my kids that entrepreneurial, bug. I'm going to impart that wisdom, and I'm not going to, depend on any school system. And I'm trying to send my kids to private school and get so they can get the best schooling. But I'm not going to lean on anyone to teach and to educate my children, and give them the necessary skill sets that they're going to need to move forward. Because you're not going to get that in any kind of school system. You're not going to get that. That's going to discipline, faith. You don't get that. In all. I'm not going to say and there's no school out there teaching that, because there's a lot of great schools that are out there, and they're redesigning curriculum. You can see what LeBron James is doing out there, and in Akron, and and my hat's off to them. But, for the most part, this curriculum and what we're talking about is the dialogue of the, of really has been dialogue of the wealthy. And it's been hidden away from the average individuals.
Yeah. And I love the state of information today is democratized to the point to where you and I and everyone else who wants to can actually go and obtain it, and most importantly, act upon it at the end of the day. So and that's that was my point. Because it's not common, because it's not taught, because it's not trained, you got to do a little bit of extra work, or dare I say a lot of bit of extra work, to go out there and get it and find it and keep it and make it yours. And that's exactly what you've done, in that's what deserves to be mentioned, and make sure that other people understand that not only have you done it, but you're making sure that there's an on-ramp for anyone else who would like to follow as well. Speaking of which, for those that have listened this far and want to find out more about what you guys got going on, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you guys?
BryanChavis.com right now, brand new website that my team and new COO Joe Ebanks has worked really tirelessly to put together. So the rebirth of Brian, it starts right at BryanChavis.com. So thank you for mentioning that. So if anybody wants to learn more, they can go there.
Okay, no problem. Now, as we wind down, I got a final question for you, because I'm curious to hear what your answer is. Let's pretend that someone has been listening this entire time. Maybe they're not quite in the game yet, but they want to get in the game, or maybe they are in the game, and you know what? Maybe they're tired of 7 figures and they're ready to hit 8, or maybe they're tired of 6 and ready to go for 7. They're just trying to level up in some way, shape, or form. But no matter how you slice it, they're at what I like to call the precipice of decision. They are about to jump in. Maybe they're standing in front of the superhero outfit store, ready to pick out their cape and tights. Now, like I know, that when we reach those moments of decision, we're often, we have a companion. That companion comes in the form of a voice, and that voice often says things like, "Are you sure? I mean, do you understand? You're a ball player. You don't understand anything about business. You're going to do real estate? Really? Do you remember what happened last time you had that great idea? You remember that, right?" And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend this time is going to be different. This time, they're going to follow through no matter what. and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
They're going to follow through. First of all, let me quickly identify that voice that you're talking and you're referring to, because that voice is a voice that we all have. But you, number one, identify that voice, because that voice is the enemy. And if you have to understand that, anybody that casts doubt or, remember the last time, anytime anyone in your life has to remind you negatively, do you remember the last time you did something? There's nothing wrong with the last time you did something when it failed. Understand my greatest teacher has been failure. So, understand when that voice comes to you, you have to turn back around and say, hey, listen, put that voice in check. Number one, that's fine. That's okay if I failed the last 3 times, the last 5 times, the last 10 times. Because there's somebody probably listening right now trying to get to the gym this afternoon because they're trying to lose weight and they haven't lost weight and they're still overweight and they're still frustrated. It doesn't matter. Every day is a new day. Every day is a new opportunity to begin anew. And so, you don't let that voice ride you, because that voice is the negativity. That voice is the enemy. And that voice will ride you to the grave. So shake that off, first of all. Second of all, get alone some time. Before you do anything, before you go and research, before you go buy that first book, figure out what it is you want. For me, it's meditation and prayer. First of all, I hone in on my spirituality, because there's 2 sides. There's that flesh side, and then there's the spiritual side. We spend all day feeding the flesh. We spend all day receiving signals from the flesh, the TV, the social media, the Facebook, all that stuff feeds the flesh. The flesh gets but the spiritual side gets deprived. Now, some people, I go to church on Sunday. So you get all 7 days goes to the flesh, and then you spend 1 hour on the 7th day, maybe in church or somewhere, trying to feed the spiritual side. And the most important aspect of who you are and the part that you take to the next when you transition is the spiritual side. The flesh goes into the ground, Jay, and becomes food for the dirt. So, when you make that transition, you're not taking the flesh with you. So focus on developing that spiritual side, because you're going to need that moving forward. You're going to need that ability for discernment when you're going into deals and you're going into, because I've been in the projects, things where I've known that I shouldn't have, and I've done it anyway out of the flesh because I felt I needed to do X, Y, or Z to get to a certain level, because I've lost everything over the last 5 years, and I've lost everything. So for your viewers that are talking about, I've lost everything. Cancer didn't kill me. The bills sure have tried. So brain tumors and surgeries have done their way with my bank account to the negative. So I understand what it's like to struggle. I understand what it's like to look at all the past due notices. I understand what it's like. So you have to go to that quiet place, and you have to begin, number one, make sure that you're ready and you're battle tested to be able to go take on this new venture, because you have to be ready spiritually and mentally to be able to go and walk this new path that you're about to walk. So the first thing is to work on yourself, invest in yourself. Don't run out buy my book. Don't run out buy anybody else's, but don't run out and do anything. Invest in yourself. Focus on yourself. Figure out this is what I want to do. Get that purpose, get that drive, and then you begin to start opening yourself to those opportunities and that education and that training. And then you can go to places and buy various different books. Some of the best books I've read have been, and that was a Freudian slip, some of the best books I've written. So if you're listening, but, The Richest Man in Babylon, The Book of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, one of the greatest samurai whom ever lived. The Bible. I'm constantly I'm constantly 5 days a week I fast. And people are, well, how long are you going to fast? I don't know. I'm going to fast until I feel like I don't have to fast. I might fast for the rest of my life, but I go from 5 to 5, because what I try to do is purposely starve the flesh. I'm doing these things, because I'm trying to enhance my walk. You know what I mean? Because it's really not all about just making the money aspect of it. And that's what I found myself in the last 6 months to a year, really trying to get back something that I've lost. And I've made a few mistakes. I've got a great team around me now, but I've made a few stupid mistakes that have slowed me up because I'm trying to get back where I'm lost. So, developing yourself, as an individual and focusing on yourself as an individual from that spirituality side to me is extremely important. And I know that's probably not what you were wanting to hear, or probably what your listeners were.
Oh, that's just so perfect. You have no idea.
But it is just as real as I can get, because at the end of the day, man, I mean, so you make some couple of $1 million. You know how many people I've talked to that made millions and then lost it? And so you're going to make it and you're going to lose it. How do you keep that balance? How do you stay consistent? How do I continue to be Bryan Chavis, a great husband, a great father, a great friend, a great partner? That stuff is not revealed, and that stuff is not created via your bank account. That kind of stuff, character, only really happens when you're trying to figure out how to pay the bills. When the past due notices, are you getting them texts on your cell phone is a few months behind schedule, and they're going to turn it off. That's when the character is developed. So if you're in that situation right now and you're listening, your listeners are listening, and they're there, and they're getting those past due notices, understand this is where the character, this is where you're being tested. These are opportunities, and there's nothing wrong with failing. So when that voice comes in and says, "Oh, you failed," or "You've tried that several times and it hasn't worked," that's where you can't allow the accuser to get into your head and tell you, because that's what he'll do. He'll ride you to the grave with that. There's nothing wrong with failure. It's the greatest learning lesson that Yeah, I will say this: I do not fail in the same area twice. So I won't make the same mistake twice. I do learn from that, but I'm not afraid of failure at all, in the least bit.
Excellent. I can relate to everything you just said in so many ways, and I've learned to take it as a sign of maturity. It means I've been in the business long enough to have knowledge, to have the experience, and that wisdom comes from the failure experiences that we've all had, so that we can just begin again smarter. And I definitely appreciate all of the wisdom and experience that you are sharing with individuals and that you've shared here with us today. And thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your insight, and your wisdom here with us at the CashFlow Diary.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? Well, here's one thing I know it means. It means getting over to bryanchavis.com. Why? Because you know that you heard exactly what you needed to hear, but it's now time for you to take action. And I also know for myself, I don't normally do this, but this happened. He recommended a book. He actually recommended a book I had never heard of. The Book of 5 Rings. And I'm sitting here going, you know what? I'm going to go get that. In fact, I've already done it because I, like you, move at the speed of instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, that voice, it's always going to be there, but it doesn't mean it has to be your master. It's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Until next time.